Well, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the University of St. Michael's College, I'd like to welcome you to this year's parent session and congratulate you and your student on being a part of St. Mike's 172nd academic year. My name is Duane Rendle, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Dean of Students at St. Mike's. And I'm the one who's going to be leading you through today's presentation, which is entitled Tips for Supporting Your Student While at University. So this coming September will actually mark my 26th year working at St. Michael's College. As you might imagine, I have had plenty of opportunities to observe how parents react when their child goes off to college. And although I've given this presentation many times over the years, last year it took on a special significance because it was the first year that my own son went off to university. And this coming year, my daughter will be going away to university as well. So you can take some comfort in the fact that I'm going to be practicing what I'm preaching here today, and that we are quite literally all in this phase of our lives together. Now, one of the reasons I like to have this parent session is because at St. Mike's, we recognize that entering university is not only a significant event in the lives of our students, but in the lives of our parents as well. When a son or daughter begins university, the role of a parent begins to change, often in very unexpected ways. For example, over the years, I have found that many parents tend to have a bit of a difficult time transitioning from being the parent of a high school student to the parent of a university student. In high school, of course, parents were immediately notified if their child skipped a class, or if they became ill, or if they were caught cheating, doing something else that was a violation of school policy. Parents also received report cards that were sent directly to them that shared their students' grades, and they were even invited to meet their children's teachers, provide updates in their children's progress. At university, however, we only get in touch with you in really serious crisis situations, not for things like your child is sick, or they've missed some classes, or they were caught cheating, or even if they've done something pretty seriously wrong in the residence. And the vast majority of our professors are not taking attendance, and they are not sharing your child's grades directly with you. And to the best of my knowledge, none of them are hosting parent-teacher evenings. And even though we realize that parents are often the ones paying most of the bills for their children's education, as university administrators, our relationship must always be, first and foremost, with our students rather than with their parents. And in fact, we are actually prohibited by law, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, or otherwise known as FIPA. We are prohibited from sharing any information about your child's academic progress, the offices they may be visiting for support, or any information about their personal situation while at university without their express written consent. In a way, when a child enters university, it's a little bit like they're graduating from seeing a pediatrician to seeing a general practitioner. A pediatrician, of course, is free to share any and all information about a child's health directly with their parents. But a GP is prohibited by law from sharing that same information with anyone except their patient. So that can be a big change, and one that will likely take a little getting used to. So, given this new paradigm we're all entering together, it is completely natural for parents to wonder how they can best support someone who's definitely no longer a child, but who's only been an adult for about 10 minutes. Well, today I'd like to share 3 strategies that I've found to be particularly effective in helping parents support their children through the course of their academic journey. The first is stepping back. The second is the art of negotiation. And the third is unconditional love and support. Okay, first up, stepping back. When a child becomes old enough to enter university, you can take some degree of solace in the fact that a big part of your demanding job as a parent is now over. Believe it or not, all of the important life lessons that you've instilled in your child are now firmly in place, even if they're not always in evidence. Now is the time for your child to begin working those lessons into their own lives, but at their own pace. So, in a very real way, we as parents need to take a step back in order to allow our children to step up and to start assuming some of the many responsibilities that we as parents have always handled for them. Now, the only problem with this great piece of advice is that stepping back from your child's life is really hard. I'm sure everyone watching today remembers when your child needed your help just to stand up. And now sometimes they may not want your help at all, even when they've fallen and you are desperate to intervene. But it's important to remember that this is the stage of their lives when children really do begin to develop their own independence. In order for that to happen, they need to start using a set of skills that for many of them has either been underutilized or ignored altogether. And even though the transition from adolescence to adulthood can at times be a little bit of a bumpy ride, as parents, we need to let our students exercise their independence, even if we don't always agree with how they're choosing to use it. So we need to be prepared for the possibility that while our child is away at university, they may occasionally use poor judgment and make bad choices, and sometimes suffer the consequences as a result. And as tempting as it might be for you to intervene, to try and spare them from all the effects of those consequences, I would urge you to try and resist that temptation in all but the most extreme cases. And the reason I say that is because so much of the strength and the wisdom and the resilience that we now have as adults has actually come from the mistakes that we have made rather than from the successes. You know, one of my all-time favorite sayings is that children do not value what is easily gained. And what I mean by that is that when a parent steps in to fight all of their children's battles for them, instead of allowing them to learn to fight for themselves, it deprives them from developing a very important life skill, and that is the skill of self-advocacy. And I would suggest to you that university is the perfect time for our students to start developing that skill. But in order for that to happen, we as parents need to take a step back, at least a little one, so that they have the space and the freedom to advocate for themselves. Okay, next up we have the art of negotiation. You know, it's funny, whenever I mention this in the university is not able to share information about a child's academic progress, invariably one parent will come up to me and ask, well, how am I ever going to know how my child's grades are? And of course, the answer is that you're going to need to convince your son or daughter to share that information directly with you. Now, for many of our parents who have a very open and transparent relationship with their student, this may not be too difficult of a task. However, for others whose relationship with their child is not quite as open, this can pose a challenge. And you'll need to have some frank conversations with your child and maybe even, yes, some negotiations to ensure that they feel comfortable sharing the details of their university experience with you. The good, the bad, and yes, sometimes even the ugly. And the reason I suggest negotiating with your child is because as kids get older and bigger and stronger and more independent, direct orders from parents tend to become increasingly unenforceable, which means that the art of negotiation and even compromise will become very important tools in your parenting toolbox. You know, one of the cruel ironies of parenting is that just at the same moment when your child has reached the age where you really begin to look forward to spending time with them as peers, happens to be almost the exact same moment when hanging out with one's parents does not rank very high on our children's priority list. So with that in mind, you may have to do some extra heavy lifting to try and negotiate some family time with your student, because as the demands of university begin to set in, so much of the free time that they enjoyed and took for granted in high school will no longer be available. And speaking from experience, that can leave parents feeling left out. So if your home is too far away for your son or daughter to visit, I would suggest that you work out a regular phone or Zoom call schedule so that both you and your student have the same expectations about how often you'll be communicating with each other. And if they are able to come home for the weekends, try to book some time at the beginning of each week when you can all get together for a family meal or a Netflix show or to watch the big game or to do whatever it is you like to do as a family together. It might sound a little bit clinical at first, but being proactive and booking some family time or phone time with your student will allow you to stay connected with them, but in a way that respects the increasing demands on their time that their coursework is invariably going to bring. And keep in mind as well that there's a natural rhythm to the semester that tends to affect student behavior in a relatively predictable way. And I'm speaking from personal experience because in addition to being the Dean of Students at St. Mike's, I'm also a former St. Mike's student myself. That's me in the upper left-hand corner. I'm not sure I still own that vest. There's me underneath and studying for an exam in my dorm room. And on the right, that's me all gussied up, ready to go out to an event that was hosted by our student union. I can tell you when I first moved into residence, I found it to be a bit of a difficult adjustment because I was from British Columbia, so I didn't know anyone in Toronto. And I found everything in Toronto was very big and confusing. My classes were extremely difficult. And I spent a lot of September on the phone with family and friends back home complaining about pretty much everything. The food in the cafeteria, the water pressure in the shower, the noise on the floor, my professors, almost anything you could think of. And that's a pretty natural phenomenon when students are put into an environment that they are not familiar with. But I have to say that by October, I began to feel a lot more settled and a lot more comfortable. I'd made some new friends in the dorm. I joined a sports team. I'd gotten to know my Don really well. I was starting to do better in my classes, and I was beginning to feel a lot more comfortable in my new home and surroundings. But then when November rolled around and midterms began, the assignments started to pile up, and there just didn't seem to be enough hours in the day to get everything done that was expected of me. I remember getting pretty stressed out, as most students tend to do during the month of November. And then in early December, when classes ended, I felt such a sense of relief, but then just 3 days later, our exams began. And I basically went into what I call bunker mode, which means I stopped responding to all my emails. I stopped responding to phone calls. If they had text messaging back then, I would have stopped responding to that too, in favor of just focusing exclusively on my studies. So, if your student seems overly needy in September, a little bit better in October, stressed out in November, and then goes to ground in December, they really are just following the natural rhythm in the life of a university student. So I guess we've got that to look forward to. Okay, my final piece of advice for you today is unconditional love and support. Even as you begin to take a slightly smaller role in the day-to-day life of your child, always know that your love and support will be the crucial and critical thing if and when big problems arrive. And almost every student at some point in their university career will encounter a problem that becomes too big for them to handle on their own. And of course, this is where St. Mike's can help out because our college has a wonderful suite of services to help your child navigate difficult situations whenever they occur. And I can promise you that whenever your child comes to us with a difficult issue, we will do our absolute best to support them and guide them in order to help them get through it. But there is one type of support that a university administrator simply cannot provide because it's the support that only a parent or close family member can give. And that is unconditional love. You know, you may not always agree with your child's decisions, and you may not always be proud of their actions. But if they know that you will always be standing by them and always be advocating for them, even when they've let you down, That knowledge can make all the difference in the world to their mental health and well-being. Whenever I meet with students who are in crisis, one of the first questions I ask is whether they've told their parents about what they're going through. And the students who tell me they have, I immediately breathe a huge sigh of relief because I now know that they've already addressed one of the biggest fears our children have, and that is the fear of disappointing their parents. On the other hand, the students who tell me that they could never tell their parents that they failed a course, or they've been caught plagiarizing, or they've spent all their money, or they're having second thoughts about their program, or even second thoughts about university in general. Those are the students that I worry about. Those are the students who keep me up at night because I know that they are being forced to endure an incredibly high level of stress all by themselves. And even though the university will do everything it can to give them advice and connect them with resources and supports, there really is no substitute for students being able to share their troubles with people who care about them the most in the world and who always will love and support them no matter what. As a parent myself, I can tell you one thing that I've learned to be true, and that is you are only as happy as your least happy child. So if your son or daughter is reaching out to you and letting you know that they are struggling with issues that are making it very difficult for them to continue on in their studies, maybe they're battling depression, or they're going through a very, very difficult breakup, or they've failed some courses, or they've succumbed to substance abuse, or perhaps they're experiencing the onset of mental illness, or sometimes they might be experiencing suicidal ideation, or whatever the serious situation might be. The biggest and best type of support that you can give them is to let them know that in advance that if they are going through any of those things, that they can always come and talk to you about them, and that you will always be there to support them, and that you will always prioritize their well-being over everything else, including their university career. There is absolutely no shame in students taking some time off from their studies in order to get in the right headspace to continue. It seems pointless at a university as challenging as the University of Toronto to continue forcing students who are in crisis and who are not thriving to continue trying to succeed. And I would really strongly encourage all parents to avoid doing that for their own mental health and well-being. Of course, university is important, and I wouldn't be working here for 26 years if I didn't believe that it was. But in the grand scheme of things, it is nothing when compared to the health and well-being of your child. And that is one aspect of parenting that will never change. So if your students always know that they could go to you with any issue that they're dealing with while they're at university, that can give them just the peace of mind to know that they're not in this alone. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to have a conversation with your student, to let them know that no matter what they're going through at university, you will be there for them and you will support them and you will stand behind them. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. I'm going to be here on move-in day, and I hope to meet as many of you as possible who are able to come to campus to physically move your student into campus. Thank you for entrusting us with your child for the upcoming academic year. We cannot wait to welcome them to St. Michael's College in the University of Toronto. Thanks again for tuning in, and I look forward to meeting as many of you as possible very soon.